The emergency beacon cut through subspace like a scream across the galaxy. Every civilization with quantum communication arrays received the same desperate message, broadcast on all known frequencies with enough power to burn out smaller receivers. This is Admiral Kethmore of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet. Our system is under siege by the Devourers. They have consumed 3 of our outer colonies. We estimate 48 standard hours before they reach our homeworld. We have 27 billion civilians who cannot be evacuated. Any civilization capable of rendering military assistance, please respond. Coordinates attached. This message will repeat every 10 minutes until our transmission array is destroyed. Across the galaxy, various species receive the transmission with a mixture of sympathy and resignation. The Devourers were known to every spacefaring race. They were an ancient scourge that appeared every few centuries, consuming entire star systems before vanishing back into the void between galaxies. No single civilization had ever been strong enough to stop them. On the crystalline towers of Veltar Prime, the Council of Minds deliberated for exactly 3 minutes before reaching their decision. The Veltari Confederation extends its sympathy to the Zephyrian people, they transmitted back. However, our fleet is currently engaged in border disputes with the Thanix Empire. We cannot spare any vessels. This was a lie. The Veltari had the largest fleet in their sector, but they were not about to sacrifice their ships against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than the Zephyrians. The Corvin Republic was more honest in their refusal. "We have analyzed the situation," came their response. "The Devourers have deployed approximately 800 vessels of unknown configuration. Based on historical data, we estimate a 93% probability of total system destruction, regardless of intervention. The Republic will not commit resources to a hopeless cause." The Thanix Empire didn't bother responding at all. They were too busy conquering their neighbors to care about threats in distant sectors. One by one, the great powers of the galaxy either ignored the plea or sent polite refusals. Some offered thoughts and prayers. Others promised to remember the Zephyrians fondly. A few suggested that the civilians might consider converting to various religions before their inevitable doom. The only offers of actual help came from smaller civilizations who lacked the military power to make any difference. The gentle traders of Miralax offered to evacuate a few thousand civilians. The artistic collective of Nexus Prime offered to immortalize Zephyrian culture in their museums. The mining guild of Asteroid Belt Sigma 7 offered raw materials for building more ships, though they acknowledged such construction would take years. As the hours ticked by, Admiral Kethmore watched his tactical displays with growing despair. The Devourer fleet had destroyed his outer defense platforms and was now systematically consuming the asteroid mining stations that formed the backbone of Zephyrian industry. Each station they consumed made them stronger, their biomechanical ships literally growing larger as they absorbed metal and organic matter. His own fleet consisted of 43 ships, ranging from heavy cruisers down to patrol boats. They were well-designed vessels, incorporating the best Zephyrian technology, but they had been built for defense against pirates and minor raids. Against the Devourers, they might last 10 minutes in direct combat. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving another response to our distress call." Kethmore barely looked up from his tactical display. "Let me guess. More sympathy and regrets?" "No, sir. This is different. The transmission is coming from a system called Sol, in what they call the local arm of the galaxy. They're requesting detailed tactical information about the Devourer fleet composition and capabilities." That got the Admiral's attention. "They want tactical data? Not just confirmation of our location?" "Yes, sir. They're asking for ship classifications, weapon signatures, movement patterns, estimated numbers, and—" The communications officer paused, checking her instruments. "And they want to know our fleet composition and defensive capabilities." Kethmore frowned. Most civilizations who responded to distress calls wanted to know what was in it for them, or whether the situation was hopeless enough to justify staying away. This was the first time anyone had asked for military intelligence. "What do we know about this Sol system?" he asked. His intelligence officer consulted his database. "Very little, sir. It's listed as a minor system with a single inhabited planet called Earth. The inhabitants call themselves humans. They only achieved faster-than-light travel about 50 years ago. They're not members of any major galactic alliance or trade federation." 50 years? Kethmore couldn't hide his surprise. "They're practically primitives. Why would they be requesting tactical data?" "Unknown, sir. Should we respond?" The Admiral considered this. What harm could it do? The humans were obviously too new to space travel to have any significant military force. Maybe they had some unique perspective or technology that could help. More likely, they were just curious about the galaxy's latest crisis. "Send them everything they requested," Kethmore decided. "Include our full sensor logs from the outer system. If they're fool enough to try helping, they deserve to know what they're up against." The data package was transmitted across the galaxy, bouncing through quantum relay stations until it reached the Sol system. There, it was received by a collection of orbital installations and ship-based arrays that would have impressed any galactic observer with their efficiency and sophistication. On Earth, in a facility buried beneath the Swiss Alps, General Sarah Chen reviewed the data with growing interest. Around her, dozens of analysts pored over the Devourer ship configurations, running simulations and calculating threat assessments. "Well," asked Admiral Marcus Torres, the head of the Earth Defense Force Space Division. "What do you think?" Chen pulled up a holographic display showing the Devourer fleet. The ships were unlike anything in human databases. They appeared to be partially biological, with metallic components integrated into organic hulls that pulsed with their own internal light. "They're big," she acknowledged, "and there are a lot of them. But they're following predictable patterns. Look at this formation data." She highlighted the enemy fleet's movement through the Zephyrian system. "They're moving from outer planets inward, consuming everything in their path. They're not trying to preserve anything, which means they're not interested in occupation or negotiation. This is pure consumption." "That matches the historical records," noted Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, the xenobiologist on the team. "Every account of Devourer attacks follows the same pattern. They arrive, consume everything that can be digested, then move on. They're like cosmic locusts." Admiral Torres studied the data. "The Zephyrians have 43 ships. We're looking at 800 Devourer vessels. Even if every shot our allies fired was a perfect kill, they'd be outnumbered 20-1. "The Zephyrians are good people," General Chen said quietly. "I've read their cultural files. They're artists, philosophers, scientists. They've never had a major war in their recorded history. Their ships are designed for exploration and trade protection, not line combat." "So what are you thinking?" Torres asked, though he suspected he already knew. Chen turned to face the room full of analysts. "How long to get the Fifth Fleet to their position?" Commander James Wright, the fleet coordinator, consulted his charts. "Through the Kepler Gate network, about 36 hours. But General, the Fifth Fleet only has 68 ships. The numbers still don't look good." "The numbers never look good," Chen replied with a slight smile. "That's what makes us human." She activated the main communication system. "Priority Alpha transmission to Fleet Command. Admiral Sarah Chen requesting immediate authorization for Operation Righteous Thunder. Full fleet deployment to Zephyrian system, coordinates attached. Timeline, immediate departure." The response came back within minutes. "General Chen, this is President Martinez. Authorization granted. You have full operational command. Bring our people home safe." "Yes, sir. And Mr. President?" "Yes, General. We're going to need to let the galaxy know who we are." Within 2 hours, Every available ship in the Earth Defense Force was moving toward the Kepler Gate network. The Fifth Fleet formed the core of the response force, but they were joined by ships from every other fleet in human space. Medical vessels, supply ships, even some of the newer experimental designs that had never seen combat. The flagship Indomitable led the formation, its hull bristling with weapons that had been designed using lessons learned from humanity's violent history. Railguns that could accelerate projectiles to significant percentages of light speed. Fusion warheads that could crack moons. Point defense systems so dense they could intercept individual molecules. But the ships were only part of humanity's response. In the cargo holds of the fleet, 10,000 Marines checked their equipment. These weren't peacekeepers or explorers. They were professional soldiers, trained in the art of war by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the craft. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the fleet arrange itself for jump. Communications. Send a message to Admiral Kethmore. Tell him help is on the way. What should we tell him about our force composition, sir? Torres considered this. Tell him we're sending everything we have. The message was transmitted across the galaxy, arriving just as the Devourer fleet began its assault on the inner planets of the Zephyrian system. Admiral Kethmore read the transmission twice before calling his senior staff to the bridge. We have an update from the humans, he announced. They say they're sending everything they have. His tactical officer pulled up the Sol system data. Sir, according to our intelligence, they can't have more than a few dozen ships. Their entire civilization has only existed in space for 50 years. I know, Kethmore said, but they're coming anyway. He looked out at the stars, where the Devourer fleet was beginning its final approach to his homeworld. In 30 hours, 27 billion Zephyrians would be dead unless a miracle occurred. Maybe, he thought, miracles came in unexpected forms. The first ships of humanity's fleet began entering the quantum gates, starting their journey across the galaxy to answer a call for help from people they had never met, to fight an enemy they had only heard about in ancient stories. Admiral Kethmore didn't know that humans had a saying about such situations. Nobody fights alone. He was about to learn what that meant. Admiral Kethmore had seen many things in his 50 years of military service, but nothing had prepared him for the sight that appeared on his sensors 34 hours after receiving the human's message. The quantum disturbance was massive, far larger than anything his instruments had ever recorded. Space itself seemed to ripple and bend as the first human ships began emerging from their faster-than-light transit. Sir, his sensor operator called out, I'm reading multiple contacts. Big ones. Kethmore moved to the tactical display, expecting to see perhaps a dozen human vessels. What he saw instead made him question his instruments. Ships were pouring through the quantum rift like water through a broken dam. First came the destroyers, sleek vessels bristling with weapon emplacements. Then cruisers, their hulls scarred and battle-worn despite their relatively new construction. Behind them came ships so large they barely fit on his display screen. How many? He asked quietly. The sensor operator's voice was strained. Still counting, sir. I show 230 contacts so far. No, 250. They're still coming through. Admiral Kethmore stared at the display. The humans had said they were sending everything they had. Apparently, everything was considerably more than anyone had estimated. The largest ship to emerge dwarfed even the massive Zephyrian defense platforms. It was clearly the flagship, its hull marked with symbols that his computer translated as Earth Defense Force and Indomitable. A communication request came through on standard frequencies. Kethmore accepted it immediately. The hologram that appeared showed a human female in what appeared to be military dress. Her hair was silver, her eyes sharp with intelligence, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Admiral Kethmore, she said, I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call. Admiral Chen, Kethmore replied, still struggling to process what he was seeing on his sensors. We are grateful for your response, but I must ask, how many ships do you have? Chen's expression didn't change. 327 combat vessels plus support craft. We came prepared for a fight. 327 ships. The humans had brought more firepower than some galactic governments possessed. But even more shocking was what Kethmore was seeing on his detailed scans. Admiral, his weapons specialist whispered, you need to see this. The tactical display zoomed in on one of the human cruisers. What Kethmore saw defied belief. The ship's hull was covered in weapons systems he didn't recognize, arranged with a density that suggested the entire vessel was designed for one purpose: destruction. Admiral Chen, Kethmore said carefully, your ships appear to be heavily armed. That would be correct, Chen replied. We're a military force. Fighting is what we do. On his sensors, Kethmore could see the human fleet deploying into formations that spoke of practiced efficiency. These weren't the loose arrangements of ships accustomed to trade protection and patrol duty. These were combat formations designed to bring maximum firepower to bear while protecting supply lines and providing mutual support. Where are the Devourers now? Chen asked. Kethmore highlighted the enemy fleet on his tactical display. The Devourers had spent the last 30 hours consuming 2 more of his outer planets and were now only 6 hours away from the inhabited worlds of his system. They've been following a predictable pattern, he explained. Consumption of raw materials followed by fleet growth and advancement to the next target. Chen studied the display for a moment. How many civilian evacuation ships do you have? Evacuation? Kethmore was confused. Admiral, we have 27 billion people on our homeworld alone. Even if we had transport for everyone, which we don't, there's nowhere to take them. Every nearby system has refused us sanctuary. Then we'll have to make sure they don't need to leave, Chen said simply. On the human flagship, Admiral Chen turned to her tactical staff. Analysis? Commander Rebecca Martinez, her chief weapons officer, pulled up the Devourer fleet composition. 834 ships now, sir. They've grown since consuming those planets. Largest vessels appear to be about 12 kilometers long. Heavy bioarmor, energy weapons of unknown configuration. Estimated combat effectiveness? Unknown, sir. We have no data on how their biosystems respond to kinetic impact or nuclear detonation, but the ships are large enough to carry significant firepower. Chen nodded. What about formation and tactics? That's the interesting part, Martinez replied. They're not using any recognizable battle formations. They're moving in loose swarms, like animals hunting. No apparent command structure or coordination beyond basic pack behavior. Good, Chen said. Instinct versus intelligence. I like those odds. She activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Mission parameters are as follows. Protect civilian population, eliminate devourer threat, minimize friendly casualties, rules of engagement, weapons free on all devourer vessels. They're not here to negotiate. The response was immediate. Across the human fleet, weapons systems came online. Rail guns began their charging sequences. Missile tubes loaded their deadly payloads. Fighter squadrons prepared for launch. Admiral Kethmore watched in fascination as the human fleet transformed from a collection of ships into a precision instrument of war. Every vessel moved to its designated position with mechanical efficiency. Support ships withdrew to safe distances, while combat vessels arranged themselves in layered formations that maximized fields of fire. Admiral Chen, Kethmore said, what do you need from us? Stay back and provide sensor data, Chen replied. We'll handle the fighting. Admiral, with respect, your fleet is impressive, but the Devourers outnumber you nearly 3-1. Perhaps if we coordinate our attacks... Admiral Kethmore, Chen interrupted gently. How many wars has your species fought? The question caught him off guard. Wars? In our recorded history, we've had perhaps a dozen significant conflicts, mostly territorial disputes that were resolved diplomatically. We've had over 15,000, Chen said, in just the last century. Fighting is what we do. It's what we're good at. Let us work. The Devourer fleet detected the humans long before the two forces came into contact. The bioships began altering their course, abandoning their methodical consumption of the outer system to investigate this new threat. On the Indomitable's bridge, Admiral Chen watched the enemy approach with satisfaction. They're curious about us. Good. Curiosity will bring them into optimal range. The Devourers moved in loose swarms, their bioships pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to serve as communication between vessels. As they drew closer, their true size became apparent. The largest ships were massive, their organic hulls scarred and pitted from countless battles across the centuries. Range to target formation? Chen asked. 40,000 kilometers and closing, came the response. Optimal engagement range? 30,000 kilometers for railguns, 20,000 for missiles. Chen watched the distance counter tick down. The Devourer fleet showed no signs of slowing or changing course. They were approaching in a direct line, apparently confident in their ability to overwhelm any opposition through sheer numbers. 25,000 kilometers, reported the tactical officer. Chen activated the fleet communication system. All ships, target the largest vessels first. Fire on my command. The Devourers closed to 20,000 kilometers, then 15,000. At 10,000 kilometers, they began to decelerate, perhaps finally recognizing that the human fleet wasn't running away. Admiral, the tactical officer reported, enemy fleet is beginning to spread out. They're trying to surround us. Chen smiled. Let them fire. The human fleet opened fire as one. The first salvo consisted of railgun projectiles, chunks of dense metal accelerated to tremendous velocities. They crossed the distance between fleets in seconds, striking the lead Devourer ships before the aliens had time to react. The effect was immediate and devastating. The bio-armor that had protected these creatures across countless conflicts was designed to absorb energy weapons and deflect conventional projectiles. It had never encountered kinetic weapons moving at significant fractions of light speed. The projectiles punched through alien hulls like bullets through tissue paper. Bioships that had survived for centuries died in seconds, their organic systems unable to cope with the massive trauma. The second salvo was nuclear missiles, dozens of them, each carrying warheads designed to crack asteroids. They struck the Devourer fleet just as the aliens were beginning to understand that they were facing something entirely new. Fusion fire bloomed in the darkness of space. Where it touched the bioships, organic matter simply ceased to exist. Entire sections of the largest vessels vanished in the nuclear furnaces, leaving behind twisted wreckage that drifted dead in space. Admiral Kethmore watched in stunned amazement as the human fleet methodically destroyed ships that had seemed invincible. The Devourers, perhaps for the first time in their long existence, found themselves outmatched. But they were not cowards. The surviving ships regrouped and charged directly at the human fleet, abandoning any pretense of tactics in favor of a direct assault. "Enemy ships closing fast," reported the tactical officer. "They're going to ram us." "Let them come," Chen replied calmly. "Launch fighters." From the human fleet came a cloud of smaller ships, single-seat fighters that moved with an agility that made them nearly impossible to track. They swarmed around the Devourer ships like angry insects, their weapons finding weak points in damaged bioarmor and exploiting them ruthlessly. The Devourers tried to adapt, their ships splitting open to release smaller bioforms that were clearly designed for point defense. But the human pilots had trained for exactly this scenario. They knew how to fight in 3 dimensions, how to use speed and maneuverability to offset enemy numbers. More Devourer ships died, then more. What had begun as an overwhelming numerical advantage was rapidly becoming a rout. Admiral Kethmore realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. The Devourers were retreating. The ancient scourge of the galaxy, the consumers of worlds, were actually pulling back from a fight. "Admiral Chen," he called out, "they're withdrawing." "I can see that," Chen replied. "All ships pursue and destroy. Don't let any of them escape." The human fleet surged forward, maintaining their formations even as they gave chase. Their ships were faster than the biovessels, their weapons had longer range, and their crews were trained killers who showed no mercy to an enemy that had consumed entire civilizations. The battle became a running fight across the Zephyrian system. One by one, the remaining Devourer ships were hunted down and destroyed. Some tried to hide in asteroid fields, only to be rooted out by human fighters. Others attempted to escape to hyperspace, only to find that human ships could pursue them even there. In 6 hours, it was over. 834 Devourer ships had entered the Zephyrian system. None left it. Admiral Kethmore stared at his tactical display, which now showed only the debris of the greatest threat his people had ever faced. The humans had done the impossible. They had not just stopped the Devourers, they had annihilated them. "Admiral Chen," he said quietly, "how is this possible? Your species has only been in space for 50 years. Chen's image appeared on his screen again. Her expression was serious but not unkind. "Admiral, how long have your people had peace?" "True peace? About 800 years. "We've never had it," Chen replied. "In all of human history, there has never been a time when someone, somewhere on Earth, wasn't fighting someone else. We've learned to be very, very good at war." She paused, looking out at the debris field that had once been the Devourer fleet. "The question now," she continued, "is what happens next?" The news spread across the galaxy faster than the fastest starship. On Veltar Prime, the Council of Minds convened an emergency session after receiving Admiral Kethmore's detailed report. The crystalline beings who had ruled their sector for 10,000 years found themselves facing information that challenged everything they thought they knew about galactic power structures. "This cannot be accurate," declared Speaker Velthon, his crystal form pulsing with agitated light. "A species that achieved spaceflight 50 years ago cannot possess military capabilities exceeding our own." The report was read again. 834 Devourer ships destroyed, 0 human casualties. Total engagement time, 6 hours and 17 minutes. "Perhaps the Zephyrians are mistaken," suggested another council member. "Or perhaps this is some form of propaganda." But the sensor data was thorough and undeniable. The humans had brought more firepower to bear in a single engagement than most civilizations possessed in their entire fleets. Moreover, they had used it with a precision and efficiency that spoke of extensive military experience. In the Corvin Republic, the military leadership was having a much more direct conversation. "How the hell did we miss this?" demanded General Corvin, slamming his armored fist on the conference table. "We have intelligence networks throughout that entire sector. How does a species build a fleet capable of destroying the Devourers without us knowing about it?" Intelligence Director Saskala consulted her reports. "Our analysis indicates they did not build this capability recently. Based on the ship designs and crew efficiency observed, we estimate the Earth Defense Force has been developing military technology for their entire spacefaring period." "That makes no sense," another general protested. "Most species spend their first century in space focused on exploration and trade. Why would these humans prioritize military development?" "Perhaps," Saskala said quietly, "because they understood something we did not." The director activated a holographic display showing the battle footage transmitted by Zephyrian observers. The room fell silent as they watched human ships methodically destroy vessels that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. "Look at their formations," she continued. "Look at their coordination. This is not a force that learned to fight in space. This is a force that brought their expertise in warfare with them when they reached the stars." On Earth, Admiral Chen was dealing with a very different set of problems. The successful defense of the Zephyrian system had created a political situation no one had anticipated. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson, her communications officer, "we're receiving diplomatic contact requests from 47 different governments, trade federations, and military alliances. All of them want to establish formal relations." Chen reviewed the list. Many of the names were civilizations that had refused to help the Zephyrians just days earlier. Now they were suddenly very interested in talking to humanity. "What about the Zephyrians themselves?" she asked. "Admiral Kethmore has extended a formal invitation for diplomatic talks. He's also asking if we'd be interested in establishing a permanent defensive alliance." "And our government's position?" President Martinez's response had been characteristically direct. "Find out who our friends are and who our enemies are. Then make sure the friends stay safe and the enemies stay nervous." 3 weeks after the battle, the first Galactic Security Summit in over 2 centuries convened on the neutral world of Sanctuary Prime. Representatives from every major galactic power attended, along with dozens of smaller civilizations who suddenly found themselves very interested in galactic politics. The humans sent a small delegation led by Admiral Chen and Ambassador David Kim. Their ship, the diplomatic vessel Harmony, was notably smaller and less armed than the vessels they had brought to the Zephyrian system. But everyone in attendance was acutely aware of what lay behind this peaceful facade. The opening ceremony was conducted according to ancient protocols that predated most of the civilizations present. Each delegation was invited to address the assembly and state their concerns. When the human delegation was called upon, Ambassador Kim rose to address the gathering. He was a mild-mannered man in his 50s with graying hair and the patient demeanor of someone accustomed to complex negotiations. Nothing about him suggested the military power he represented. "Honored delegates," he began, "the people of Earth are grateful for this opportunity to address the galactic community. We are new to the stars, and we recognize that we have much to learn about galactic customs and diplomacy." There were subtle movements throughout the assembly. Many delegates had expected the humans to arrive with demands or threats. This humble approach was unexpected. "However," Kim continued, "recent events have made it clear that the galaxy faces threats that cannot be addressed by any single civilization. The Devourers were but one example. There are others." He activated a holographic display showing stellar cartography data. "Our intelligence networks have identified 17 separate threats currently active in various sectors of the galaxy: pirate fleets, rogue artificial intelligences, biological hazards, dimensional incursions. The list continues." Speaker Velthon of the Veltari rose to respond. "Ambassador Kim, while we appreciate Earth's concern, the galaxy has managed these threats for thousands of years through established protocols and mutual cooperation agreements." "With respect, Speaker Velthon," Kim replied, "those protocols failed the Zephyrians. If Earth had not responded to their distress call, 27 billion people would be dead. That represents a significant failure of the current system." The assembly erupted in murmurs and side conversations. Several delegates activated private communication channels to consult with their governments. Admiral Kethmore, attending as an observer, requested permission to address the assembly. "Honorable delegates," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber, "I speak as someone who has seen human military capability firsthand. These people saved my civilization when no one else would help. But more importantly, they asked for nothing in return." He gestured toward the human delegation. In the 3 weeks since the battle, human medical ships have remained in our system providing humanitarian aid. Human engineers have helped us rebuild our damaged infrastructure. Human scientists have shared technology to help us improve our defenses. And have they requested anything in exchange for this assistance? Asked General Corvin of the Corvin Republic. Only one thing, Kethmore replied. They asked us to join their defensive alliance. Ah, said the general. And what are the terms of this alliance? Admiral Chen rose to respond. The terms are simple, General. Any member civilization that comes under attack can call upon the alliance for assistance. All members contribute what they can to mutual defense. No member is required to participate in offensive operations outside their own territory. And command structure? Pressed the general. Shared command during joint operations, with field commanders chosen based on expertise and experience rather than political position. The implications were clear to everyone in the room. The humans were essentially offering to serve as the galaxy's military when needed, while allowing individual civilizations to maintain their autonomy and domestic policies. Speaker Velthon leaned forward in his crystal throne. And if we choose not to join this alliance? Ambassador Kim's expression didn't change. Then you choose not to join. Earth has no interest in forcing unwilling partners into defensive pacts. But, Admiral Chen added quietly, we also have no obligation to respond to distress calls from civilizations that have chosen to remain outside our defensive network. The meaning was unmistakable. Join the human alliance and receive protection from threats like the Devourers. Remain outside it and face such threats alone. After 3 days of deliberation, the vote was held. The Zephyrians voted yes immediately, as expected. They were followed by 17 smaller civilizations that had been targeted by various threats in recent years. The gentle traders of Miralax voted yes after the humans offered to provide security for their trade routes. The mining guild of Asteroid Belt Sigma 7 voted yes after being promised protection for their remote operations. More surprising was the yes vote from the Corvin Republic. General Corvin explained their position simply. The humans have proven they can fight. We respect that. The Veltari Confederation abstained, as did several other major powers. They were not ready to accept human leadership, but they were also not prepared to reject it outright. The Thanix Empire voted no, but their representative made a point of requesting a separate bilateral defense treaty with Earth. They had been fighting a series of border conflicts with various neighbors and were interested in access to human military technology. When the votes were tallied, 31 civilizations had agreed to join what became known as the Terran Defense Alliance. It wasn't a majority of galactic governments, but it represented over 60% of the inhabited systems in the galaxy. As the summit concluded, Ambassador Kim found himself approached by Speaker Velthon. Ambassador, the crystalline being said, I must ask, what does Earth truly want from all of this? Kim considered the question carefully. Speaker, my species has a concept called enlightened self-interest. We've learned that protecting our neighbors ultimately protects ourselves. A galaxy where civilizations help each other is a galaxy where Earth can prosper. And if some civilizations choose not to cooperate, then they make that choice, Kim replied, but they also accept the consequences. Speaker Velthon's crystal form pulsed thoughtfully. You realize that many civilizations will view Earth as a potential threat. A species with your military capabilities inevitably raises concerns about future expansion and conquest. I understand those concerns, Kim acknowledged. Time will prove our intentions. We're not interested in conquest. We're interested in stability. And if someone challenges that stability? For the first time in the conversation, Ambassador Kim smiled. Speaker, I think the fate of the Devourer fleet answered that question quite thoroughly. 6 months later, The first major test of the Terran Defense Alliance came when the Vortak Dominion launched a surprise attack on 3 mining worlds belonging to Alliance members. The assault was clearly intended to test human resolve and response time. The response came in the form of Admiral Torres and a battle group of 40 human ships, supported by vessels from 6 Alliance members. The engagement lasted 93 minutes. The Vortak fleet was completely destroyed, with the surviving crews allowed to return home in escape pods to deliver a message to their government. The message was simple. The Alliance protects its members. After that, requests to join the Alliance tripled. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable, watching Earth turn slowly below them. The planet looked peaceful from orbit, its blue oceans and white clouds hiding the turbulent history that had forged humanity into the galaxy's protectors. Ambassador Kim joined her at the viewport. "Any regrets about how things turned out?" he asked. Chen considered the question. "We always knew that entering galactic politics would be complicated. I just didn't expect it to happen so quickly." "The Zephyrian crisis forced our hand," Kim agreed, "but I think we've handled it well. We're not conquerors. We're not trying to build an empire. We're just trying to make sure good people don't die when there's something we can do to help." "And the galaxy is safer for it," Chen replied. On her personal communication device, she received the daily intelligence briefing. 17 active threats were now down to 3, thanks to Alliance operations. Trade routes were more secure than they had been in decades. Piracy rates were at historic lows. The galaxy had learned something important. When someone sent out a distress call, it would be answered. Not by governments weighing political advantages or civilizations calculating profit margins, but by humans who understood that sometimes the right thing to do was also the necessary thing to do. As Admiral Chen watched Earth rotate below them, she reflected on the irony that a species too young and too violent for galactic civilization had become its primary protectors. Humanity had answered a galaxy-wide SOS with their battle Armada, and in doing so, they had changed the nature of galactic civilization itself. The age of every species standing alone had ended, the age of the Alliance had begun, and somewhere in the depths of space, potential threats to galactic peace reconsidered their plans, knowing that Earth's ships were watching and Earth's fleets were ready to respond. The galaxy was no longer defenseless. It had found its guardians in the most unexpected place, a small blue world on the edge of nowhere, populated by a species that had learned long ago that freedom was something worth fighting for.